Welcome to the Healthcare Technology Report, a leading information source on healthcare technology companies and solutions. In this episode, we speak with Steve Basta, President and CEO of Phathom Pharmaceuticals, a biopharmaceutical company focused on developing and commercializing treatments for gastrointestinal diseases. The company has licensed exclusive rights in the United States, Europe, and Canada to a potassium-competitive acid blocker, and is building its commercial business around therapies for acid-related GI conditions. Steve was appointed president and CEO and joined the board of directors in April 2025. He brings more than 25 years of leadership experience across biopharmaceutical, medical device, and digital health companies, including CEO roles at SaNOtize, Mahana Therapeutics, Menlo Therapeutics, AlterG, BioForm Medical, and Merz Aesthetics. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you liked the episode, click to follow. Steve, thank you so much for taking the time. It's great to chat with you today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
We have a lot of ground to cover because you've been involved in the healthcare technology space throughout your career and in different areas, from biopharma to med devices to digital health. Maybe for the benefit of our audience, we can talk a little bit about you and your background, and then we'll lead into Phathom.
Terrific. Be happy to do that. And again, thank you for the invitation to have the conversation. I joined Phathom almost a year ago now in the context of positioning the company for the next stage of growth and leading it through that evolution and transition. My background includes, as you described, running a range of healthcare companies. So most notably for about 10 years, I built a medical aesthetics company where we were developing first an injectable filler that created a new class of injectable filler and is still one of the leading products broadly in the filler space. We developed a neurotoxin, we developed a sclerotherapy agent, so we were developing a range of injectable products used by dermatologists and plastic surgeons in the aesthetics market. Did that for north of 10 years through the evolution of that business. I ran a capital equipment physical therapy company selling an anti-gravity treadmill, which for anybody out there who's a runner is the best running environment imaginable. It is unbelievable. You feel like you are floating on air because you literally are floating on air. You can use air pressure in the device to unweight to the point where you can run and get all the cardiovascular work and the joy of running, but have less impact on your joints because you've reduced impact forces. It's an amazing rehab environment, which is the medical use of it. And that was the core of the market, but it's also an amazing running training environment and was used by high performance athletes, by lots of sports teams. So I had the good fortune of building a business in that space. And as you said, in the digital health space, actually relevant to what Phathom is doing now in GI, I launched the first digital therapeutic for IBS. And we were using cognitive behavioral therapy embedded in a digital app that would enable a patient to go through a learning program to manage their IBS symptoms. It's just amazing clinical data. It was one of the first prescription digital therapeutics that was approved. So a range of different experiences that have given me a little bit of perspective on the healthcare market, from not just the pure traditional pharma perspective, but thinking about how pharmaceuticals are launched, how digital therapeutics are launched, how injectable aesthetics products are launched. It's a range of different applications.
And I presume kind of your educational background helped prepare you to do this variety of businesses and products, given you're at Johns Hopkins.
It did in ways that I might not have anticipated at the time that I was doing it. So I did an undergraduate degree in biomedical engineering with a lot of work in economics as well as an undergrad, and then went to Wall Street immediately after college and ended up on the corporate finance side of working with small healthcare companies to help raise money and sort of thinking through strategy. So a combination of the undergraduate engineering discipline and bringing an engineering mindset to problem solving and to technology evolution, along with, I really consider it sort of an extension of the college experience to spend 2 years on Wall Street learning in the corporate finance environment. You sort of work in indentured servitude for 110 hours a week for a couple of years. But the trade-off is you work hard, but you get access to strategic conversations that most 22-year-olds don't get access to. And so you learn a ton about how companies really think about strategy. And it's that combination of thinking strategically and sort of an engineering discipline and problem solving. And it's been fun building companies in the healthcare space.
And it seems you joined Phathom at a kind of a point of inflection. I mean, they were in the commercialization process, and now you're reporting your revenue and how well the company is doing quarter to quarter.
Right.
How might this experience leading this company be different than ones in the past?
Every market is unique. Every product is unique. Every competitive space is unique. So, how you launch a product in the aesthetic space in one competitive environment among fillers is very different from how you launch a novel gastroesophageal reflux treatment in a market that has been dominated by generic therapies for the last 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
So we have an interesting space in that I don't actually view that we have a competitor in the market. What we have is a broad background landscape of existing utilization. And what we are trying to do is not compete with anybody for share. What we are trying to do is educate physicians about when it's appropriate to use the next generation product. We provide enhanced outcomes for patients that are in many ways delivering a more potent elevation of pH in the stomach than is achievable with prior generation of therapies. That's important for some patients, not needed for all patients. And so a lot of what we do is educate physicians about how to think through that trade-off. When is current therapy adequate? And when is it that you need the next generation therapy?
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the tie-in with digital health. How does that kind of hold the solution together?
Well, so the tie-in that I made with digital health is my prior digital health company happened to be in the GI space. You don't really need digital health to manage GERD.
Right.
GERD is not a digital health driven issue. This is not going to be a behavioral therapy driven issue. This is really a physiological issue, which is anatomically a patient is getting reflux of acid from the stomach into the esophagus. And the best way to manage that is to elevate the pH in the stomach so that any fluid that goes back up into the esophagus is not as acidic and is not going to cause damage. And it's a very simple biochemistry problem that this is just an issue of an acidic environment causing irritation when it goes into a part of the body that it's not normally supposed to be in. The stomach is well suited to deal with a highly acidic environment. The lining of the esophagus is not. And so that acid movement into the esophagus is what's causing pain. You want to treat the pain, you simply raise pH in the stomach and you solve that. Super simple equation. What we're able to do is raise pH in the stomach to a greater degree than was possible with the prior generation of therapies. So the simple framework is the right patient for VOQUEZNA, our product, is a patient who has tried prior therapies and is still in pain. A patient who's used the prior standard of care therapies, typically PPIs, in some cases H2 blockers or just over-the-counter antacids, but almost all of the patients with severe GERD end up on PPIs, sometimes on double-dose PPIs, sometimes twice-a-day dosing with PPIs. And if you still can't get relief, you're not raising pH in the stomach adequately. The case for many patients. That patient may get relief by raising pH on the stomach even more with VOQUEZNA. And so it's a patient who's failing on a PPI or still having heartburn while on a PPI that is the natural patient to try our drug.
Where are you in the company life cycle? I mean, I presume it's still very early. You already have some scale. I mean, it looks like you had about 580,000 patients. That number is probably higher. But give us a sense for kind of where you are in the company life cycle.
Well, so that number is now higher. In terms of total prescriptions, we actually just hit a milestone of 1 million prescriptions, which we hit right at the end of 2025. So we've been ramping really nicely. Now that's total prescriptions. That's not number of patients, because a patient may have multiple prescriptions. A prescription is just 1 month of therapy, and many patients are on this therapy chronically. We are just entering year 3 of our launch. So we got approval in 2023, launched at the end of 2023, and had a really nice ramp in 2024 and 2025. We expect to continue that moving into 2026 and to continue the really positive momentum. And the positive momentum for the company, the positive momentum for the product, all comes from the fact that patients who need our drug are in significant pain. And many of those patients experience significant relief of that pain when they switch to a new therapy.
Mm-hmm.
That is the reason that physicians seek this product. It's the reason physicians prescribe this product to patients. It's the reason patients who are on the product stay on the product. I mean, the number of testimonials that we get is astonishing of patients who find that the relief that they get when they switch to VOQUEZNA is so profound that it fundamentally improves their quality of life. And we're hearing that over and over and over again. I mean, these are obviously anecdotal reports from individual patients, but we hear that so often. The patients who are experiencing significant GERD, I don't know if you've experienced it. I am a patient as well who has significant GERD, and it's really disruptive. When you're in pain, you don't think about much else. You just need relief from that pain.
Mm-hmm.
And if omeprazole is not doing it for you, and esomeprazole is not doing it for you, you need something better. And VOQUEZNA is a fundamentally different kind of treatment.
And how do we think about the size of this market and kind of the potential for the drug to be further distributed?
So there are a couple of different ways of thinking about the size of the market opportunity. There's 60 million plus patients that have GERD.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of patients are treated adequately with current therapies. So we're not going to try to treat all 65 million of those patients. By some estimates, 60% of patients who are on PPI therapy, which is the prior generation of therapies, that's Prilosec, Nexium, a whole range of products that people know as household names, they work for 60% of the patients that take them. For 40% of the patients, they're still in pain. That's our population. Now, that's still an enormous number of patients. But for 40% of the patients who try PPIs, they're still in pain, and that's just from various published reports. That's the patient who will naturally want to try VOQUEZNA because they want to seek a solution that might provide them relief because they're not getting adequate relief from the current therapies.
Mm-hmm.
That's where our opportunity sits. It's an enormous opportunity. We're still in the early innings of this process. And the process looks like the following. We are focused heavily today on communication with gastroenterologists.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about the gastroenterologist as the key transition point where a patient who's still experiencing significant pain would be seeking a new therapy. So if you think about the patient journey here, typical patient with GERD might try some over-the-counter antacids. They're going to try Tums and Broids and see how that works. And if Tums works for them, great, they're done. If they're still having GERD, they're going to go talk to their primary care physician. When they go in, they're going to say, Doc, I'm having a lot of heartburn. The natural thing that most physicians are going to do is they're going to put them on omeprazole. So they're going to put them on sort of a common PPI. And again, for more than half of patients, that's going to be enough. Great, patient feels better because it raises pH in the stomach. And if that raises pH in the stomach enough that it solves your pain, great, you're done. The patient that we typically target in a gastroenterologist office is a patient who's now come back to their primary care physician and said, Doc, I've been on this drug. I've tried it for 6 months or a year, and I'm still having lots of heartburn.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they double the dose. Maybe the primary care physician adds a second drug to it. If they can't get relief for the patient, they're going to send them to a gastroenterologist, because what they want to do is they want the patient to get scoped and make sure that there isn't some other serious problem. So the patients that are now in a gastroenterology practice are the patients who were in significant enough pain that they were complaining to their primary care physician that they were still in discomfort. That's the patient who is the natural candidate to try our drug. So if the amount of pH elevation you get with a PPI isn't enough, we can raise pH even further. And so our conversations are primarily driven to educating the gastroenterologist who's now seeing that patient coming to them who's still experiencing significant pain, that there is a possible solution that could improve outcomes for that patient.
Mm-hmm.
They will pick which patients that it's appropriate for.
Now you're continuing to raise capital, or you have sequentially raised capital. And, now that you've launched, can you tell us about where the capital goes towards? Is it more towards the expansion of existing products? Is it more R&D? Where does the capital go towards?
So we have the good fortune as a company that we are just on the cusp of transitioning to the point where we aren't going to be burning additional investor capital or aren't spending additional investor capital, but we're starting to generate capital. We're not there yet, but we are approaching the transition point where we transition over from being a company that is spending more cash than we're generating in revenue to the point where we're generating more revenue than we're spending. And that's going to be coming. In fact, we've signaled that we're going to be profitable on an operating profit basis by the second half of 2026. So again, not there yet, but that's our expectation, is that we're going to be making that transition. We made significant strides in 2025, both growing revenue really nicely and steadily every quarter. From first quarter to fourth quarter, we doubled our revenue. And in addition to that trajectory, we brought down our spend rate substantially so that we're positioned to transition to being a profitable company. We did raise some cash recently, but that's mostly around fixing some debt on our balance sheet. That we had a lot of debt that had come from prior financings and we need to adjust our capital structure. But it was really around that change rather than a fundamental need for the capital on an ongoing basis. We're going to be moving to a transition phase of being profitable and ultimately cash flow positive.
One area we like to touch on is investors and how they may add value. I know you just came in over the last year and there was prior investors, some good names, Fraser. Are they still kind of around the company? How have maybe some investors helped the company aside from financial capital?
Well, you'd mentioned Fraser. The Fraser partnership created this company. It wasn't just that they provided funding. It was actually one of the members of the Fraser team who had the original concept, working with some of the scientists that were involved to say, look, we can bring the asset in and license it from Takeda, and there's a real need for a better gastroesophageal reflux treatment, and we think the market opportunity exists. And they developed a strategy by which the company was formed and which we are still executing to this day. So that original conceptualization plan came out of a venture capital group. The product was licensed from Takeda with exclusive rights for the US market, and actually US, Europe, and Canada. But we're really only focused right now on the US market. And we've been launching the product based upon their original strategic plan. One of the Fraser partners still sits on our board. They've been tremendously supportive and providing guidance throughout the entire evolution of the company.
Back to the kind of original or the first part of our conversation, how you've kind of led different types of companies throughout your career. Is there a commonality in terms of your leadership and ability to build and grow organizations? Are there kind of certain tenets that you keep top of mind as you're kind of cultivating cultures, and just ensuring you hit targets, more so about your kind of business philosophy?
So I think that there are several dimensions to that are helpful. The first and most important element is having the right team, having a talented team throughout the organization, both at the senior level and just throughout the organization, having really talented folks and believing in them and allowing them to lead in the areas where they have depth and expertise. I have the good fortune that, part of our management team was here at the time that I joined. Part of the management team we've recruited over the past 9 months. And we've got a group of folks that is remarkably talented, remarkably dedicated, and has been driving the success of the company over the past year. The other part of it is it's not just about bringing in a leadership team, but it's about listening to the folks that actually know best what's happening. So the first thing that I did when I came into the organization was I spent several weeks listening to everybody in the company, or teams within the company. We've got several hundred people, but for example, I had calls with the regional managers for our sales organization, sort of 3 separate groups of regional managers, to ask what's working, what's not, what are the sales reps experiencing when they're calling on accounts. And from those conversations emerged the strategic pivot that we executed. What the team told me, this is not like my idea, I didn't come up with some great plan. This is just a matter of listening and integrating the input from the really talented folks throughout the organization. What the team said was, when we call on gastroenterologists, they need our product, and we get really good receptive conversations. And when we call on primary care physicians, they don't yet have the same perceived need. Now, they will, by the way, I do believe that there's going to be broad uptake in primary care, but that's going to be sequential after the uptake happens within gastroenterology, because that's where early adopters lie. That's where the highest need state is, because the patients we were talking about earlier that are landing in their office are patients who have significant pain despite the prior therapies. So they have patients who need our product. That's why they were more receptive to the sales calls. But the clear answer coming from our team is, this is working really well. This is really frustrating. It isn't getting as much progress. So the simple answer is, let's do more of the thing that's working really well. And if we do that, we're going to be really successful. So again, part of the formula is have really bright people who are really capable, but a large part of the formula is integrate input from the team. Listen to the insights and the expertise of the team that exists, and allow the best ideas that are generated internally to come to fruition, and create that empowerment at all levels in the organization. We try to do that culturally within the company.
Last two questions. One is, can you tell us about a person who has had a profound influence on you?
My father was my role model growing up. He's still around, but he's sort of slowing down these days in his 90s. But he was one of the brightest, hardest working people I knew. And he's a physician, he was a cardiologist. And at every moment of his life, every conversation he was having, he was prioritizing his patients. His priority was, how do I deliver an amazing outcome for this patient? And it was just such a clear and focused ethos that he brought into every interaction, that it still sits with me today as I run the company. Our primary job, we're in the healthcare business, our primary job is to deliver great outcomes to patients. That is first and foremost, has to be our North Star around which we guide our decisions. If we can deliver great outcomes to patients, then lots of good things happen.
Last question. Can you tell us about a charity, cause, or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
So one of the things that I've spent a lot of time with is education broadly. Comes from personally participating in education. I mentioned earlier in this conversation, I did a lot of work in economics as well as an undergrad. Ended up teaching junior achievement classes for a period of time, just because being around students in that teaching environment, I find to be enormously gratifying. Getting involved in my kids' schools, supporting education programs, particularly where there are students who may not otherwise have access to educational opportunities, and being able to support some of those makes a really big difference for individuals and can influence people's lives in a really positive way.
Excellent. Well, Steve, want to thank you again for taking the time. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the invitation to do this.